The Last Word with Matt Cooper.
Today FM.
It all happens here.
Today FM.
Now, we're joined by one of the best known voices in the country. One of the best known voices when he's singing as the lead singer of Picture This, but he is now also a published poet. Ryan Hennessy is with us, author of Syncopated Blue. Thank you very much for joining us here on The Last Word on Today FM.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Tell us about poetry. How long have you been writing poetry? Because we know you write lyrics for Picture This, but how long have you been writing poetry?
I've been writing poetry since the age of 7. That's kind of my earliest memory of writing poetry. But I stopped when I became a teenager, I think, for a few years because it was not very cool in my circles. And
Why
then-
had you said it to people and they'd sort of maybe give it out to you a bit about
No,
it? or what?
I didn't say it to people because I was kind of forecasting
You
that it
knew
wouldn't
what way
be.
they'd react.
Yeah, I knew what the answer would be. Yeah, but yeah, I wrote like my first poem when I was like 7, and I did that for a few years, and then I kind of stopped for a few years, and then the singing and thing happened. I started singing when I was 18, and then I kind of fused poetry into songwriting, and it just became songwriting. And then I kind of just stopped writing poetry altogether because it just became songs. But then I kind of found the mental space again to be able to write poetry, and they're quite separate entities.
Well, I was just going to
me.
ask you about that. How different is it to be writing something as a poem rather than writing it as a song?
They're very different for me. I kind of compartmentalize them in my brain. They come from different places. It's hard to describe, but they come from different places. I know a song is a song. Like, we're a pop band, so you have certain confines, which I love, and it's why we're a pop band, and I love that. But when it comes to poetry, it's a lot more direct, and kind of a lot of the time for me, it's a stream of consciousness just right onto a page, and there's no kind of, I don't go back and edit it or try to shape it into anything. I just kind of let it be what it is.
So you don't go back and rework it, no?
Very rarely. Very rarely. I like to just leave it as it is because that's it in its purest form for me. I know that might sound, I don't know, conceited or whimsical or whatever, but I like to just leave it as it is because that's the purest it's ever going to be, and that's what I like about poetry, is that kind of...
How did you get into your love of poetry? Was this encouraged in family or in school, or how was it?
It was encouraged in family and kind of killed in school, my love for poetry. My dad wrote poetry and my grandfather wrote poetry. So
Really?
I come from a kind of line. But yeah, they wrote poetry, but they never kind of pursued it in any serious manner, if you know what I mean. It was just an outlet for them. And my dad stopped writing poetry when he got to around my age, I think, and he started having kids and stuff and rearing us. So
And did he talk to you about that subsequently?
yeah, it would have came up. We come from a sporting family. Like, that's all we talked about really was soccer, and all kind of sports and that kind of thing. We never really spoke about it in depth, but I always knew that he had done it and my grandfather had done it, and they were good at it. And I came from a very open household, so I was encouraged to express myself in whatever means I wanted. And poetry just kind of became one of those things.
But if you gave it up at one stage because you were sort of worried about how people would react, how difficult was it to return to it and then to actually go to a situation where you're putting yourself forward as a publisher of poetry?
Yeah, I did find it difficult to return to it because people have been telling me I kind of returned to it when I was around, I would say, 18. And people had kind of encouraged me all the time, like the boys in the band and stuff, because they knew that I wrote poetry, and all of the people around me were always encouraging me to do a book. They always said you should do a book and put all your poems in a book, and I never really liked the idea of it for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe it was kind of the aftermath of being a teenager and getting that kind of response of being like, oh, I don't know if anyone's going to like that. But then when lockdown happened, I had time for the first time since the band started, because we'd been touring basically for 5 years, or just being all over the world, which I love. And I thought, if I don't do it now, I'll probably never do it, because I don't know when I'm going to have this much idle time again anytime soon.
And do you perform the poetry as in do readings? Because, you know, that is a lot of poetry is, okay, for the reader, they can maybe perhaps do it in their own voice and they sort of see, but from the actual writer of the poetry, do you ever perform it for people?
I've done like videos online and stuff of me reading them, but I have to say I do prefer the reader just reading it themselves. I didn't write it to be performative or spoken word or anything like that. It's kind of, I prefer if people just read it, but I know that people do love, because I had never considered doing an audiobook of a version of it, but I posted some videos online and then everybody started requesting that, so I'm looking into that now. People said that it kind of gives them it's like an easier access into the poem when I read it, which I don't really understand. I guess I don't have the context because it's me, but yeah, some people prefer when I read it out.
Who do you think is going to buy and read Syncopated Blue? Is it going to be the Picture This fans, or do you think is it going to be a different audience?
I think it's going to be a bit of both, because I did a book signing on Saturday, and it was a really nice mix of half and half of the usual fans that we would see at Picture This album signings, who I was delighted to see. But there was also another half of the people who kind of came to say, there was one woman who came in, she was an American lady, and she came in and said that she had heard me reading a poem somewhere the previous day. She said, I don't know anything about your band, I don't know who you are, but your poem stopped me in my tracks, so I wanted to come down today to see what the story was. And that was such a compliment to me, and I was like, okay, well, it's connecting. It's not just, and I'd be happy if it was just the Picture This fans, because they're my people, and I love them. But
You mentioned how school nearly knocked the love of poetry out of you. In what way? Because I suspect there's probably lots of people listening to this who sort of might be groaning at the thought of the poetry that they did for Leaving Cert or whatever, and may have never read a poem since.
Yeah, and that was me. Like it was a weird one for me because I loved poetry, and then going into school and studying it, it was just very, very like methodical and not very expressive. And it was a weird thing because the teacher would interpret the poem and then tell you their interpretation, and that was it. I never felt like I was allowed to interpret it or question their interpretation. So it was very much personal to the teacher, I always found, which is just weird. It was a weird way of digesting poetry for me, and it kind of killed it how because poetry for me is very freeing, and like I talk about within pop music, you have to write within certain confines, and you can write anything in poetry. And I always found it weird that, okay, I have to work off my teacher's interpretation. I didn't really like that.
If I asked you to read one of the poems now, would you do so?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure, I'll hand you over a copy of your own book, Syncopated Blue.
Yeah.
When you go to it though, will you try and pick out one that isn't going to get me in trouble with the censors, with the sort of all the F words and the sex and all the rest?
Sorry,
One of those. Don't go for one of those poems if you don't mind, please.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in there.
There is a bit. Well, in fairness, there's an awful lot about relationships and sort of feeling your way and learning your way into relationships, and particularly how relationships develops in their early stages. That seems to be one of the themes of the book, is it?
Yeah, there is. It was always my way of expressing myself as a teenager and as a young man in relationships. Don't know if I was always great at expressing it within the relationship, so writing about it always helped, which is self-serving, I guess, when you think about it. I'm trying to find one here that doesn't have a swear word or any sort of sexual undertones.
Which is going to be very difficult. Not that difficult. We'll find one there.
Oh, I found one.
Grant, go for it.
I read you poems through the phone as you're drifting off to sleep, grasping the supermarket teddy I had bought you just last week. I try to keep my speaking soft so that your eyes can rest, but when I say a line you love, I hear your gentle breath. I mark the corner of a page if the words feel just like you, like the mention of a nervous laugh or of the colour blue. I want my words to fall away and land inside your dreams, and keep you warm and kiss your head and soften all your sheets. I'll see you soon and hold you soon and read you poems in skin, and calm your head and kiss your neck and breathe your beauty in.
Do you think that performing with Picture This has given you the confidence to actually be published and to actually speak your poetry?
Yeah, absolutely. That the band changed my life. I was a very I guess I am still quite inward as a person, or like in my own head. I spend a lot of time in my own head, but I would have been too nervous, and I would have a lack of confidence if it wasn't for the band. The band kind of made me. I kind of became a man when the band started, and gained so much confidence. And yeah, I don't think I ever would have been able to do a book without the confidence that the band gave me.
Well, let's move on to music and some of your selections for the Culture Club here on The Last Word at Today FM. And I'm going to start with your favourite band, and who have you picked and why?
Favourite band is Oasis, which I'll never forget the first time I heard Oasis come out of the speakers in my spare bedroom at home, in the box room that I was in.
How young were you at that stage?
I would have been probably 10, I'd say. And it was weird because I never really paid attention to music, even after that, really. I listened to Oasis pretty exclusively for a long time. I remember just putting on the CD. It was my sister's boyfriend at the time gave it to me because he had a spare one. And I put it on, and I remember just there was something that just spoke to me. I don't know what it was. I think in some way, I think I kind of felt the working classness of it, or just in the accent and the twang and what they were singing about. And I never really thought of music like that before, and I just loved the kind of energy that came out of it, and I loved it ever since. And it's amazing songwriting. Noel Gallagher is an incredible songwriter for me.
Let's hear a little bit from What's the Story, Morning Glory, Wonderwall.
Backbeat, the word is on the street that the fire in your heart is out. I'm sure you've heard it all before, but you never really had a doubt. I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now. And all the roads we have to walk are winding, and all the lights that lead us there are blinding. There are many things that I would like to say to you, but I don't know how. Because maybe you're gonna be the one that saves me. And after all, you're my wonderwall.
There'll be a lot of people around Hinsey, I think, that would say Oasis's best work was their earliest work.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, I love their early albums. There was an innocence to it, I think, and I think I remember hearing Noel talking about that. When they became successful and he was going to all these, lavish parties and living a lavish lifestyle, he kind of said, I couldn't write about being on the dole anymore. I couldn't write about any of that kind of, and which I always kind of admired, which I was like, fair play. He could have carried on pretending that he was still living that kind of life. But yeah, there's just a rawness and a great energy to the early records.
As you got that bit older, did listening to Oasis open up you to other bands? I mean, for example, famously Oasis so influenced by the Beatles.
Yeah, it did. The big one for me was actually the Stone Roses. Oasis opened me to the Stone Roses, who then kind of became my favourite band. So it's a toss-up between both of them. I remember just seeing a photo of Ian Brown somewhere and thinking, well, he looks a lot like Liam Gallagher. And then I was like, oh wait, it's the other way around. Liam looks like Ian Brown. Yeah, and that's how I discovered Stone Roses, actually, yeah.
Which fantastic music by Stone Roses. You also mentioned Biggie Smalls.
Yeah, Biggie Smalls, from the age of about 15 to 17, I exclusively listened to Biggie Smalls for 2 years for some reason. I discovered Biggie, and it just spoke to me. It just really cut me in two the first time I heard his song Juicy. And it was just like, it was so alien to me what he was speaking about, because it was so far from where I grew up, in every sense of the word. But just how he used the words, it was poetry, really, to me. And a lot of that kind of hip hop music is poetry compared to hip hop music nowadays, which I don't really listen to personally. But Biggie has a great ability of, when I listen to the song, I feel like I'm there. I feel like I'm in the moment. I feel like I'm on the streets of Brooklyn in 1995, which is incredible. So I love Biggie.
Okay, now, the best gig you were ever at.
What did I say for that? I can't remember.
On the list you have the 1975 and the 3 year.
Yeah. That was the most amazing kind of combination I've ever seen of performance, music, and production. The production really blew me away in terms of what they did with their screen and stuff, because we loved that with my band.
So were you watching this almost with a professional eye as for what things you could pick up?
I kind of became that. Yeah, the 1975 were my favorite band of like current times. So I was just going as like a super fan. Like, I'm obsessed with them. And then I kind of start to look at gigs now with different eyes than I did before, which I don't know if I really like, because I'm kind of looking at it and thinking about my own gig, and that's great what he's doing there, and maybe we could do something like that rather than just being able to enjoy the gig.
Yeah, but then when you are performing, and I know you're back on the road next week and you're starting to go back after an 18-month hiatus doing gigs in the UK, but it's not just getting up and singing your songs. I mean, how much attention do you pay to Not just the performance, but the production values, the staging, the presentation, all those things.
Everything, that's everything to us. Myself and Jimmy were across everything. So we designed the production, even for I guess our most recognisable production was for the Five Nights at the Tree Arena, which me and Jimmy and the two guys, Owen and Cliff, we all sat down and designed ourselves, and we went through it all. And Jimmy will actually create a lot of the content that goes onto the screen, and we do all the track ourselves and the stage setup. It's all of that is super important to us, and even down to performance. I like to go a bit mental on stage. I think going mental is a good way of describing it. Such a release for me, and I love that, the whole performance element. I think people are surprised when they come to see us play because they hear the songs and their love songs and all of that. But our show is a bit, and a lot of people will not like me saying this, but our shows are very rock and roll in a way, in terms of the energy and the production, and it's a show. It's not just a gig, if you know what I mean. It is a show. So that element is very important to us.
How much are you looking forward to getting back to live performance?
I can't wait. I can't believe, like, we've played 3 festivals over the summer in the UK. We played Transmit 2 weeks ago in Glasgow at like 4 o'clock in the day, and there was like 25,000 people there for us, and it was just insane, just the energy and just the feeling of being back there. And it's purpose for me, being on stage and being able to express in that sense and perform. That's real purpose for me, and it's when I feel super fulfilled, and it's just where I want to be all the time. I just really genuinely love it, and I never want to spend that much time away from stage ever again.
What about gigs here in Ireland? Because you were due to play Malahide Castle, wasn't it, last year, in a big sellout gig, which obviously didn't go ahead because of COVID.
Yeah, so that's happening next summer now. So that's delayed pretty much. Yeah, nearly. That will be the 3rd year. It's the 3rd summer away from where it was supposed to be. We're playing 3 shows. We're playing Musgrave Park in Cork, and we're playing Belsonic in Belfast as well, which is going to be amazing. And then this year we're actually quite lucky in terms of we're playing 2 shows in Donegal at the end of next month, and then we're playing 3 shows in the INEC in Killarney in the middle of December. So we've actually got 5 shows, which are all big shows. So hopefully they're going to happen. As far as I know, they're happening. And it's going to be amazing. I can't wait for the UK tour, but you just can't beat playing in Ireland. For us, the shows are just ridiculous. The crowds, it's just like I always describe our crowds as like a crowd that goes to a football game. You know what I mean? They're mental, and I love that, and I miss it so much.
All right, we need to take a break. Ryan Hennessy, who of course is poet, the author of Syncopated Blue and lead singer of Picture This, is with us for the Culture Club here on The Last Word of Today FM, and we'll be back with more of his choices after this quick break. Welcome back. Ryan Hennessy has stayed with us on the Culture Club here on The Last Word of Today FM, and we're going to go to some of his other choices as well. And let's start with a favourite play or musical or show, because you've made one of my favourite picks, your pick as well. Tell us why you love the Book of Mormon so much.
I love it so much because, first of all, it's the only play I've ever seen.
Right, okay, well that's a good reason.
Yeah. So my comparison is not great, or my context, but that really blew me away. We went to see that in New York when we were on tour one time, and I'd always been like a passive fan of musicals, just seeing and hearing about them, and everybody was like, we have to go see the Book of Mormon, it's meant to be incredible. And I was like, okay, I'll come. And after like 10 minutes I was just blown away by it's just such a feel good thing. And I really wanted to go and see a lot more plays because I felt amazing coming out, and just the performance and the story and how good the actors are. Yeah, it was brilliant.
It's also very, very funny.
It is very funny, yeah, it is. It's
Let's
brilliant.
hear a clip from the Book of Mormon. This is Andrew Rennells.
Ever since I was a child, I tried to be the best. So what happened? My family and friends all said I was blessed. So what happened? It was supposed to be all so exciting, to be teaching of Christ across the sea. But I allowed my faith to be shaken. Oh, what's the matter with me? I've always longed to help the needy, to do the things I never dared. This was the time for me to step up. So then why was I so scared? A warlord who shoots people in the face. What's so scary about that? I must trust that my Lord is mightier and always has my back. Now I must be completely devout. I can't have even one shred of doubt. I believe that the Lord God created the universe. I believe that he sent his only son to die for my sins. And I believe that ancient Jews built boats and sailed to America. I am a Mormon, and a Mormon just believes.
The Book of Mormon, which was due to come to Dublin, I think, last year, and then obviously was cancelled because of COVID. So hopefully it will be coming back soon.
Yeah, I
for
hope
anyone
so.
who had a chance to see it, it is one of the great Broadway shows. Let's move on to favourite movie. You've picked out This Is England.
Yes, This Is England changed my life when I saw it. My brother introduced me to a lot of things like music and that kind of stuff, like the Smiths and all of that. But he brought home This Is England one time on DVD, and I just saw the front cover of it, and it looked like this kind of gang, and I was like, this is interesting. I don't know what this is. And he described it to me as like football hooligan-esque, which I guess it kind of is, but not really. So I watched it, and it I know it sounds like such a big statement. It changed my life, but it did, because
Why?
it introduced me to so much that I didn't know. It introduced me to Fred Perry, which is I just love Fred Perry as a brand. I love clothes, and it was the first time where I saw how sharp they all looked, and I was like, wow, this is cool. Like, this is a gang of kids who are not doing any harm, but they all look great and they're having fun and they have such identity. There were like punks and skinheads and mods, but it introduced me to all of those subcultures, which then in turn changed my life, because I love mods and I love punks and I love the skinhead culture and the two-tone, and I love all of that, and that influences how I dress. And for me, outside of music and poetry, I don't like the word fashion, but clothes is my big love, and that really introduced me to a lot. It introduced me to the mod scene and all of that, which then in turn kind of influenced my whole life, and I really just related to it as well. Like the kind of idea of being part of a gang. I really like the idea of. I resent the idea of being part of a circle, and I love the idea of being part of a gang. And
What's the difference?
people move in circles. I know people who are part of lots of different circles, and it's not for me. And people always try and entice me to move in certain circles, and I just don't like it. I like being part of a gang though, and having my own people, and I love the identity and the collectiveness, and I just love that feeling of everybody. Because when you're in a circle, everybody's out for themselves, but when you're in a gang, it's that kind of communal spirit, and I love that kind of communal spirit, and that's what I miss about gigging. I miss everybody being in a room and being part of. That's my gang, you know what I mean? Being on stage and being in a room like that.
We have a clip from This Is England, and I have to give listeners warning that there is some very strong language in this clip in which we hear Stephen Graham appearing in the Shane Meadows directed movie.
I mean, for 3 weeks, right? This fucking wog, right? Proper horrible. Sorry, mate. Sorry. Didn't mean nothing by that, you know what I mean? Just slip of the tongue, like. Sorry, this brown gentleman who, he was a bully though, he was a horrible bully, do you know what I mean? No matter what colour he was a bully. And I hate bullies, don't I, Wood?
No,
Can't stand them, man, can't stand them. But for 3 weeks, right, this fella was robbing my pudding.
What kind of pudding was it?
Doesn't matter what pudding it was. That's not the point, the pudding's not the point. The point is, he was taking my pudding off me. And I've just thought, nah, I'm not having it. I don't care. You're not getting my pudding, that's it. So I've grabbed it and I've gone, no, mate. No, you're not having it. He was like, wait, boy. Give me your pud. Proper. Do you know what I mean? And I've just thought, nah, man.
There we are, Stephen Graham, who's a really compelling character.
Yeah, he is. He's an amazing actor. And that was another thing that kind of clip kind of highlights was I was so young at the time that I was so innocent. I wasn't aware of the kind of racial climate that's portrayed in Britain at that time, and I had no idea, and it really shocked me, and I had to watch it a few times to really take it in. But Stephen Graham is such a compelling character in that, to get that kind of portrayal across was amazing.
Let's move on to books, because clearly you write a lot, not just writing song lyrics for Picture This, but you write your poems. Do you read a lot?
I don't read as much as I should. I've tried to improve that, and I once I started writing the book, I tried to do that as well too. And just even in inform myself and my vocabulary even. I don't read as much as I should, but I have a few favorite books. That's one thing that poetry in school did for me, was it introduced me to Sylvia Plath, which she became like my favorite poet pretty much. And The Bell Jar was the first book that I ever read. But yeah, I don't read as much as I should.
You have picked a book called Simple Passion by Annie Ernaux.
Yeah, that's a book that I discovered accidentally. I picked it up because I liked how it looked on the shelf. It's just this white cover with blue writing, kind of the opposite of my book actually. But what I liked about it was not out of laziness, but just how short the book was. The book's like 80 pages long or something, and but it was described as a novel. So it really intrigued me to be like, how did she write a novel in such a short space? That must be either incredible writing or lazy. And I still don't know which one it is, but it feels pretty incredible to me. And it's just a book about a love affair, but it really I think I read it while I was in France as well, because we just went on a kind of road trip with the band where we drove all around Europe, and I was reading it on that, so that kind of heightened my senses of what was going on in the book. But I just think it's incredible to be able to distill a story down in such a short space of time and still make it be so amazing.
We have an extract from the audio version. This is read by Tanya Gilbert.
One day, in a television weekly, I began reading about a troupe of Cuban dancers who were on tour in Paris. The author of the article stressed the sensuality and permissiveness of Cuban women. A photograph showed the dancer who had been interviewed, tall, with dark hair, her long legs exposed. As I read on, my intuition grew stronger and stronger. By the time I had finished the article, I was convinced that A, who had been to Cuba, had met the girl in the photograph. I imagined them together in a hotel room, and nothing at that point could have persuaded me that this scene was improbable. On the contrary, the very idea that it had not taken place seemed to me absurd, inconceivable.
For the book Simple Passion by Annie Ernaux. I see you've done his favourite TV show, Normal People. Have you read Sally Rooney's book?
I haven't, no, and I've been meaning to do it ever since I watched it, and I will.
You should.
Yeah.
I just, from chatting to you over the last half hour, I think you'll love it.
Yeah, I think so too. I really want to, because that TV show, really and truly, like, I've never seen my upbringing be portrayed so like, it was ridiculously close to my upbringing, where I was like, this is
sports mad family as well. Like.
Yeah, and just the culture and everything. It was just like, I know so many Connells. Do you know what I mean? I know so many Mariannes. I know all of these people, and I am these people. And there's been a lot of portrayals of kind of Irish upbringing and all of that, which it's usually before my time, so I can't really relate to it. But this was the first time I've seen a portrayal of
your generation,
my generation, and it was just so spot on. I've watched that series 3 times.
You have to read the book, so
yeah,
the book is terrific. But let's hear a bit from the TV series in which Connell played, of course, by Paul Mescal, is In Therapy.
People seem to like me, everything, and here I don't think that people like me that much. Like with Rob, my friend, who I wouldn't say that we clicked on a very deep level or anything, but we were friends. And I wouldn't say that we had a lot in common in terms of interests or anything, and definitely not politically, not that we ever really examined that, but that stuff didn't really matter in school, because we were in the same group of friends, so you know.
I understand that.
And he did some stuff that I wouldn't have been a fan of in terms of, like, with girls, but we were 18, you know, we just we acted like idiots. I think I felt a bit alienated by that stuff.
Paul Mescal as Connell in Normal People. Unfortunately, we don't have time to discuss your love of The Simpsons, which I think was your formative TV experience, was it?
Introduced me to so much that I didn't know about. And only now, as an adult, when I look back, I think, well, I found out about that on The Simpsons. Which is weird.
And very briefly, and we don't have a clip from it, your favourite podcast?
Favorite podcast is Two Bears, One Cave. It's Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura, who are two American comedians who I just find very funny. And they're complete opposites in terms of Tom is very intelligent and Bert not so much. And it reminds me of my dynamic with Jimmy in the band.
Who's who?
He's the intelligent one.
Listen, Ryan Hennessy, it has been terrific having you here for the Culture Club on The Last Word Today FM. I'm sure many of our listeners are looking forward to seeing Picture This in concert, be it in Donegal or Kerry later this year, or in Dublin and Cork or Belfast next year. But we'll also be really interested in your new book of poetry, Syncopated Blue. Ryan Hennessy, thanks very much for joining us here on The Last Word of Today FM for the Culture Club.
The Last Word with Matt Cooper.
Weekdays from 4:30. Today